Good evening and welcome to the webinar this evening. My name is Michael Rutherford. I'm calling in from San Diego, California. Glad to have everybody calling in tonight from around the world and certainly from all over the United States. We've got a really great bit of information that we're going to dive into here very shortly. I just have the distinct pleasure of hosting tonight. You know, it's interesting, the world's changing right in front of us, and for those of you that have been plugging into some of the gamification and appification conferences that we've been doing over the last few months and tapping into these weekly calls leading up to this event in Dallas in April called Playbook 2.0, you're going to notice a theme about games and about gamification and about how the world has become a game, and people that learn how to gamify their businesses will learn how to really win at this game called life. So we've got a great person that's going to dive in tonight, an individual that for the last 20 years has really worked in technology and worked in you know, transformation, primarily using technology to change the way that people do business. And this conversation tonight about games and about gamification, put your seatbelt on, grab a piece of paper and a pen. You're going to love it. I'd love to welcome to the first part of the call, Mr. Jim Bunch. Jim, you with us?
Yes, Michael. Thank you so much. It's great to connect with everybody. And as Michael said, hold on to your hats, because this is one of our educational webinars where we hope to maybe open your eyes to some new ideas, new concepts, and maybe you'll get a chance to come join us in a city and see some of our technology firsthand. So tonight we're going to be talking about how to gamify everything and why gamification is going to be what we see as one of the single largest trends of the next decade. But more importantly, how do we get in front of these trends? So a lot of people are like, well, why would we gamify anything? I don't play games. I don't have time for games. Well, my hopes are by the end of this presentation, you actually look at things a little bit differently, because what is happening now is a major shift in the world. And if you think about business over the last 20 to 50 years, what we were doing through the Industrial Revolution is we were really systemizing things. We were operationalizing things. We were scaling things. But there's been a shift in business. And what you're noticing now is it's more about the experience that people are having, whether that's the experience as a client or the experience that you're having inside of your business or in building your business. So our hopes are that you can see how to build a bridge between where you are in your life and in your business and where things are headed. And our mission here is to help you inspire fun and drive change. So the other thing that we want to do tonight is to open your eyes to this gamification layer that's actually already been put on top of the world, and to help you see how you, me, and a lot of the things we do on a day-to-day business, level in our businesses has actually already been gamified. So as Michael said, I've had a unique opportunity to be in the right place at the right time with a couple different businesses, most of which in the technology industry and also in transformation. And we've built some companies, we've kept some companies, we've taken some public, and this last one is actually a passion project of mine, the Ultimate Game of Life, where I really started to look at gamification at a whole new level. So before we dive into any of that, I want to explain a theory, and some of you may see yourself inside of this theory. There is a concept that's passed around the world of games called Bartle's theory. And what Bartle discovered is that there's really 4 types of people that play games. Now, you and I probably have multiple of these categories, but what he found was there are 4 different types. The first type of person who plays a game is what we call a socializer. And as the name would suggest, a socializer actually joins a game because they want to connect with other people. Their primary reason that they're playing it, any game, is because most of the time they're heart-driven. They want to interact with other players, and on some occasions, these interactions lead to longer-term relationships. Okay, but their primary purpose in playing the game is to meet others. Now, maybe you know somebody who's like this. They have a high extroversion. They're the person that goes to the parties just because there may be somebody there that they don't know yet, right? These are the people that are oftentimes find themselves in jobs where they have to be around a lot of people. It might be sales or marketing or anything like that. So these players love the interaction. The second category of players is someone called explorers. And when we talk about explorers in the world of gamification, they're often called spades. And what that means is they have a tendency to dig around. They have a tendency to want to discover areas or create maps or learn about hidden places, right? And oftentimes they feel restricted when a game expects them to move in a certain area within a certain time without allowing them to look around at their own pace. So think about this. Who do you know that enjoys Easter eggs, right? Who do you know that is the person who's always trying to find the glitch in something? These people are what we call explorers. And their reason that they play the game is they want to interact, but they want to interact with levels that they may not have discovered yet. The next category is our achievers. And your achievers are oftentimes in the gaming world called diamonds. These are people who prefer to gain points, levels. They want to gather equipment or some kind of concrete measurement that they're having success in the game. Now, of course, if we're talking about games for fun and entertainment, that's one thing, but we also probably know people in real life who are gaining access to certain status. It could be a home, a car, or some type of title, right? And these types of people, the achievers, typically will go to great lengths to achieve rewards simply for the prestige of having it. Okay? So when you think about these three, these are the ones that actually make up the majority of games. And people who design games understand this, and they make their games to have the majority of it for socializers, explorers, and achievers. The final category here are called killers. And killers in the game world are actually a breed of achievers. But the killers are the ones that are also called the clubbers. They thrive on competition, much like the achievers. They're prepared to fight, but oftentimes the killer's intent, whether it's a single-player game or a multiplayer game, is to actually prevent others from winning. Now, that could be other players, but it could also be the people who are designing the game. So the killers go into the game to find the holes, the loopholes, and to see if they can't bring the game down or bring the other players down. They're the ones who will actually spend time and money and energy just to try to dethrone somebody else. They're not oftentimes looking for the recognition from it. They actually just get off on taking somebody else down. Okay? So I wanted to give you a little bit of Bartle theory so that you can now start to understand how not only entertainment games are being designed, but as you'll see pretty soon, how games of business and games of life are actually being designed. So one of the trends that we see nowadays is apps for everything. And if you've been on any of our other webinars, you've noticed that we've taken you into the app world, in other words, the mobile world. If you haven't been on one of our other webinars and this is your first time, ask yourself this question. How many of you know someone who has had an idea for an app or somebody who has shared an app with somebody else? It's the latest buzz. It's the latest trend. So the second thing that we're noticing through business and life is gamifying everything. And the third trend that we're going to touch lightly on tonight is the power being in your hands. In other words, there's major shifts that have happened on our planet that is putting the content creation, that is putting the user's experience back into our hands, which is making it way more interactive than we've ever had as a species before. It used to be that we just consumed content. Now we create content, we share content, we critique content. I mean, if you look at something like Wikipedia, the whole thing was built on the concept of lots of people using a platform to create content. Well, the same thing is happening with apps, and it's happening with games, where people are not only the ones playing the games and consuming the games, they're actually involved in creating the experience in the games because we're creating social games. So in this first trend called Appify Everything, and again, I'm only going to touch on this tonight because we have other webinars that will take you deeper just into the app world. But if you'll notice something from the company called Flurry, you'll notice in this the number of apps by category, and they've broken into things like business and health and news, navigation, productivity, sports, music, reference, lifestyle, travel, education, utilities, entertainment, books, and then, of course, games. 19% of all of the apps in the App Store, which has reached over 1 billion apps, are games. Here's another shocking statistic. 80% of the downloads to people's smartphones are games. So 19% of the apps in the store are games. 80% of the downloads that go onto people's phone are games. So we know that this is not just a trend, this is actually what the consumers are saying, hey, this is what we're most interested in. Now, along that lines with Appify everything is we're seeing apps for health, right? So you see this app here where you wear a device that communicates back how many miles you've jogged. It'll also tell you your sleep patterns. It'll track your food activity, and it'll socially share that with other people. You know, you may have seen this one. You may have seen Nike's. Mobile medical is on the rise right now with apps that will actually give our biofeedback and our medical feedback back to our doctors if we give them permission to view it. So why would I ever go to the hospital, or why would I go into my doctor and have him take, my vital stats for 15 minutes when he could simply look at my app integration and see it for the last 90 days? We're seeing apps in the area of wealth. We're seeing apps in the area of, for example, things like mint.com or QuickBooks, where you can look at real time at your finances, your incomes and your expenses. We're seeing apps that are for happiness, which are not only games, but apps around raising our awareness, or meditation apps, or just apps that are fun, right? So we're seeing that these apps are coming in, but now we're also seeing the integration of apps with gamification. And the moment you create a leaderboard, the moment you make them social, the moment you publish an opportunity to earn a badge or a level, what you're actually doing is you're activating those 4 quadrants of the socializers, explorers, achievers, and killers. So ask yourself, what is it that actually motivates you, not only in the game world, but how could this be used to motivate us in the real world, in life? And one of my favorite quotes is by Mickey Mantle. He says, "It's unbelievable how much you don't know about the game you've all been playing all your life," right? Which is the game of life. Now, of course, he was talking about baseball, but in reality, the truth is every piece of our life has been gamified. Now, when we're kids, we start with things like neighborhood games, like maybe you played tag or hide and seek or kick the can. But eventually those neighborhood games ended up becoming things like board games, and they ended up on our kitchen table with Monopoly and Scrabble and the game of life. And eventually they went from the kitchen table over to our TVs, to the arcades. And we started seeing arcade games where you used to put a quarter or 50 cents into these games and play pinball or Pac-Man or Space Invaders. And eventually those big video games ended up becoming console games, and they crept back into our homes like Atari and Nintendo and Xbox. And then maybe you remember they went from console games to social games, where online you'd play games like World of Warcraft or Farmville, right? And now these games have not only been in the neighborhood, not been on the kitchen table and in the arcades and in the consoles and on our computers. These games have made their way into the palms of our hands with mobile games like Mafia War and Tap Resorts and Words with Friends, right? So these are the traditional games that people play for fun and for entertainment. But now those games are actually crossing over into real life. There are companies like Foursquare and Mogul and MyStand and The Ultimate Game who've created rewards and loyalty programs to incentivize us in the real world to play their games. Now, the way that I was exposed to this, and the reason I got really interested in this, was I was having some friends over for dinner, and these were actually acquaintances at the time. I hadn't met them before, but we had this couple by the name of Rick and Rona Thompson come over, along with another couple and one of my business partners and my wife and I. I remember this because my son was about 2 years old at the time, and we're having wine and we're chatting, and everybody's kind of getting to know each other, and eventually we were going around the table sharing, well, what are you up to and what are you involved in? And this amazing couple, Rick and Rona Thompson, said that they were building a company called Playbook. And at the time, the company was about a year old. And I said, well, what is Playbook? And they said, well, we create social games. And I said, what kind of games? He goes, well, for example, have you ever heard of the game Mobsters? And I said, no, not familiar with it. And they said, well, basically what happens is that people sign up and they get an avatar. And part of what they do in this game is they have to invite their friends. In other words, they build a network. And they invite their friends to build up the size of their mob. The bigger their mob gets, the more power they have in the game. And I go, okay, network science, that makes sense. I go, what else do they do? They say, well, once they start building up their mob, then what they need to do is acquire currency, and they need to acquire equipment. And I go, oh, what kind of stuff? And they say, well, they get coins, and they buy things like guns and knives and tanks. And I go, okay, why do they do that? And they say, well, there's a mob, and they're taking over the city. So they knock over newspaper stands and grocery stores, and maybe they even knock up an old lady. And I'm like, what? I've got a 2-year-old here. What are you talking about? And they said, hey, it's just a game, right? Well, I go, okay, I'm interested. Tell me, how many players, quote unquote, do you have on your game? You've been doing this about a year. And Rick says, well, on our way to dinner, we checked in. Currently, we have 19 million active players. And it got silent. And I went, excuse me? They had 19 million active players in 1 year? And Rona goes, yeah, and if you asked us at dinner tomorrow, we would have 20 million active players. Now, I don't know how many of you are on this webinar or listening, but if you've ever tried to get 1,000 people into your business, or 10,000 people, or 100,000 people, or even 500,000 people, it takes a lot of energy and effort. But what they had figured out is that if you can give people a fun experience, if you can get them to socially share and collaborate and compete, if you can give them an opportunity to earn rewards and prizes, you can create an amazing audience. So I scratched my head and I went, wow, this is pretty incredible. And I said, if you don't mind, I'm somewhat of a business person. How do you make money at this? And they said to me, well, Rona did. She goes, well, somebody might want to upgrade their avatar by buying new clothes or buying new swords, or maybe they want to upgrade their hair to something like Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie's hair. And I said, what does that cost? I said, oh, it might be 99 cents. It might be a couple of bucks. Maybe they want to buy more artillery, and it gets a little bit more and a little bit more, and they buy these credits for it. And I said, well, do you mind if I ask? You've got 19 million players. Mind if I ask what kind of revenues you're doing? And they said, sure, no worries. Right now, we're doing about $30 million, and this should actually be a year, not per month, $30 million per year in revenue. And I thought to myself, gulp, I need to learn about this. So I actually went downstairs. I had 3 offices at the time. I went downstairs, pulled up Play-Doh, and did a little research on who these people were that I was having dinner with, and I got incredibly interested in gaming. But what was interesting is at that time, my window popped open on my Skype, and one of my friends from the East Coast, by the name of Randy Zales, said, hey, what are you up to? And I said, I'm having dinner with Rick and Rona Thompson of Playdom. And he said, Playdom like mobsters? And I go, yeah. And he goes, no way. He goes, I just pulled out my American Express Black card and spent $500 to take out this other mobster. And I type back, I go, you did what? He goes, I spent $500 to take him out. I didn't want to have to earn my way up to the top. I bought my way to the top and wiped this guy out. So I said, thank you. You just paid for our wine. Have a great night. We'll talk later. I went back upstairs, and that led me down a journey. This was about 5 years ago. That led me down on a journey to discover more about how gamification, not just in video games, but in other areas, is actually infiltrating the rest of our life. And I ran across this gal by the name of Jane McGonigal. If you look her up on head.com, which are great videos, in her 18-minute presentation, she talks about how people are opting out of real life. They're opting out of reality, and they're investing. Millions and millions of people are investing an average of 13 hours a week. I mean, there's 183 million active gamers in the U.S., right? 105 million in India. Take a look at China, 200 million active gamers. Now imagine if you had a tribe or a workforce of hundreds of millions of people that just invested in your business for 13 hours a week. Well, what I also found interesting is these gamers have figured out human psychology at a level that most psychologists haven't figured out. If you look at this picture on the left, this is a picture of a young boy who is being photographed while playing games. The expression on his face, the angle of his eyes, the curvature in his mouth, everything in there shows that this young man just had what's called an epic experience. In other words, he just unlocked or overcame something in the game that was so surprising, so epic, that he didn't even know how to respond to it. Look at the surprise and the excitement in this guy's face. Well, these gamers have figured out how to release epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, all the chemicals that are fired off in our brain that can make us feel excitement, they can make us feel fear, they can make us feel elation, they can make us feel frustration. They have figured out how to literally wire us for gaming experiences. So think about this for a minute. Not only can you build a large audience, not only are there revenue opportunities, now you can actually influence someone's psychological and emotional experience in real time. So some of you may have heard of some of these companies like Zynga, who was founded in 2007, became the largest gaming company in the world, has over 250 million active users, and at one time was valued at $7 billion. I know there's some bad press going around about where they're at right now, but the truth is I wouldn't be surprised if you see these guys back on top pretty soon. So you see these kind of things popping up. And when you start to put it together with some other facts that I heard from Jay McGonigal, that so far we as a society, in other words, the gamers in this one game called World of Warcraft, have invested over 5.93 million years playing that one game. And according to Jay McGonigal, that's not enough. She said the typical gamer plays for about an hour a day. There's 6 million in China who actually spend 22 hours a week on games. More than 10 million hardcore gamers in UK, France, Germany, and spend 20 hours a week playing games. 5 million extreme gamers in the US play for 45 hours a week. And currently, we as a culture of gamers are playing 3 billion hours a week. And she says it's not enough. At her Institute for the Future, she says that we actually need to be playing 21 billion hours a week, but not just of games for entertainment. We need to be playing games that help us with our financial challenges we're having in the world, help us with our environmental challenges, help us restructure the way that we're doing politics, help us design games that actually create a whole new way to do life. And she has committed her time to helping create the right games to not only heal people, but to change the way that we do life. So now that we take a look at some of these facts, let's dive into, well, what is gamification? Maybe you've heard this term, maybe you haven't. To make it simple, what gamification is the art of behavior mechanics and incentivization. Okay, it's not just playing games like Farmville. It's actually how do we get people to behave, and incentivization is how do we make it fun? So what if going to your job or building your company or just doing life was as fun as a game? Well, would you be interested? I think I would. And the reason why is that gamification is all about increasing engagement, growing revenue, and driving lifetime user value. Remember I said before the industrial environment that we used to be in as business was really about creating structure and systems and operationalizing things. Now what you're seeing is everybody's making things more towards our happiness and towards our health. It's all about having more fun and engaging more of our community, right? Getting us to have more conversations so that we can actually create more conversions. This is what gamification is all about. And this is just getting started because up until recently, the only way to play these games was through the web or in arcades or through our TV. Well, now that it's gone to mobile and there's actually over 400 million global smartphones, with 80% of the app downloads being games, we can see that the trend for gamification infiltrating all areas of our lives has gone through the roof. Now, I know some of you are scratching your head and saying, all right, where's the business behind this? Well, if you've ever done any lead generation in your business, right? If you've ever had to pay for a cost per click, or you had to drive audience to your website so that you can convert them into your products or services, these guys do the same thing. The average lead cost per download in 2011 was $1.85. The average lead cost for our business on the web is about $6. When you start recognizing that these app downloads and these games are getting these billion-dollar valuations because of the audience they're driving, you can begin to see that some of the trends that are happening aren't just fads, they're actually a whole new way to do life, and there's quite an economic rationalization as to why these are here. For example, the mobile gaming industry alone is expected to reach $54 billion You know, I heard a story not long ago about last Christmas. Actually, I heard it a while ago. It was at Christmas time, that someone had actually knocked over, meaning held up, one of the trucks with the new delivery of one of the most popular games. I don't remember if it was Halo or which game it was, but they actually held them up at gunpoint, stole all of their games, and sold them out on the black market. Now, I obviously don't condone any of that kind of behavior, but I want to point out to you that if you're unfamiliar with the world of gamification, and I'm talking about the enterprise gamification, it has actually penetrated all of our lives already. And you may be saying to yourself, no way, how is this? Well, think back to the day, and some of you may not be old enough, some of you may remember this. One of the original gamifications was shopping. Do you remember S&H green stamps, where you would collect these stamps that had some random value assigned to them, and then you'd have a catalog, and that catalog will allow you to get prizes? That's actually gamification in the old school. How do they do it in the new school? Well, you see apps like Shopkick, where you go into Macy's, or they push an ad to Best Buy or Macy's or Sports Authority or the local grocery store. And what do? Just by walking in there, you collect kickbucks, right? And the more the kickbucks that you get, the more bonuses you get, and the more rewards you get. So they're driving what? They're driving behavior by incentivizing us. And they're making it social by telling our friends about it to give us more points. Here's another way that you may have been gamified. How many of you, be honest, how many of you will choose one airline over another because of the points that you're getting? Well, loyalty is part of gamification. Points and free trips is part of gamification. So many of us have been gamified and didn't even recognize it. Well, this is now moving into other areas like education. You know, Khan Academy has found a way to make learning fun for people. They give real-time stats on your achievements. They give badges. There's social feeds. The whole thing is built as a game. You see, learning doesn't have to be boring anymore. It can actually be fun. And here's the crazy thing. Kids demand it nowadays. As a matter of fact, there are programs like this youth app lab where students come in after school and they build Android apps and they earn badges for doing it. These kids love it, and they're creating the economy of the future. As I already mentioned, some of you guys may be aware of this.